The ROI on canning. Is it worth the expense? A Guildbrook farm perspective. The one question I always get asked on every canning video is whether canning is worth the expense. In particular, pressure canning. The cost of a new canner can run $240, and then there are the jars to buy, and most people buy new lids every time they can. Sounds expensive. It can't possibly be worth it. Or could it? Well, let's take a look and compare canning food versus freezing food. We'll do canning first. Now I use the Mac Daddy of all canners, the All-American 921. This canner holds 7 quart jars and up to 16 pint jars, and will run about $240. Pressure canners are used to can low acid foods. This means foods such as meat, fish, soups, and vegetables. The one thing that I always can in my pressure canner is ground beef. So let's use that as our food example. We will put up a chalkboard to keep a tally, and we'll label one column canning and the other freezer. Now let's examine startup costs first. The price of our All-American canner is $240, so let's add that to the chart. Let's say that your family eats 20 pounds of ground beef per month. A pint jar will hold about 1 pound of beef per jar. That means you will need 20 jars. Now, Ball jars are one of the best brands of jars, and they come in a case of about 12 and include rings and lids. Each case costs about $9, so you will need 2 cases for your beef. That comes to about $18, and you will probably have a couple extra jars left over. Let's add $18 to our chalkboard for jars. So to can 20 pounds of beef your first month, it will cost you about $258. After your first month, all you will need to buy is new lids. Lids come in a 12-pack and cost $2 each. If you buy new lids each time you can, you will need 2 packs each month, which is about $4. Now let's compare that to a deep freezer. Each cubic foot of deep freezer space holds about 35 pounds of food. So a small 7 cubic foot deep freezer will easily hold about 245 pounds of beef and will cost you about $200. Now that's not the Mac Daddy of freezers, that's just a cheap freezer from Walmart. Let's add that to the chalkboard. Now we need to talk about electricity. The cost to run that freezer will run about $4 per month. So we'll add $4 for that first month of electricity. So freezing your food for the first month will cost you about $204. After your first month, you'll need to continue to pay electricity each month, which is the same cost as buying canning lids each month. So ongoing costs for both canning and freezing is a wash. So let's tally it up. For 1 month, canning cost $258 and freezer cost $204. Aha! Canning costs more by $54. Well, hold on. Let's look at this over a 6-month period. Now your canner is still going to cost $240. Let's add that back to the chalkboard. Now if you eat 20 pounds of beef over 6 months, that equals about 120 pounds of beef. 1 pound of beef per pint jar means you would need 120 jars to can it all at once, which is about 10 cases of jars. That will cost you about $90. Let's add that to the chalkboard. So total investment for canning over 6 months is $330. Now let's compare that to the freezer. Your 7 cubic foot freezer costs $200 and your energy costs $4 per month, equaling $24 for a total of $224. This is getting worse. Canning is now $106 more than a freezer. Canning is so not worth it. Well, hold on now, there are a couple other things to consider. According to the University of Minnesota, blackouts have increased 124% over the last several decades. Unless you have a generator, one good power outage will spoil all the food in your freezer within 24 hours, potentially costing you hundreds of dollars in food loss. Canned food doesn't spoil during a blackout. Food stored in freezers can get freezer burn after 3 months. While mild freezer burn isn't an issue, heavily freezer burned foods will have to be thrown away due to quality. Canned food doesn't get freezer burned, and it can last on a shelf for years. Food stored in freezers will have to be thawed 24 hours in a refrigerator, soaked in cold water, or microwaved before they can be used. Canned food is ready to eat or to use in a recipe, right from the jar. Then let's talk about storage space. Your 7 cubic foot freezer will only ever hold 245 pounds of food. If you want to expand your pantry, you will need to buy an additional freezer, which will be another $200. On top of that, your electricity will double to $8 per month. If you want to expand your canning, you just need to buy more shelving space and more jars. Shelving can be scrapped together for free, and another 6 months of jars would only cost you $90. So to sum it up, canning for 1 month is going to cost about $54 more in equipment than freezing, but that's a one-time fee. Electricity and canning lids will cost about the same month over month, so those cancel each other out. Canning for 6 months is going to cost $116 more in equipment than freezing. Again, a one-time fee in equipment, and canning lids and electricity will cancel each other out again. If you are canning for 1 year, then the cost of having a larger freezer or a second freezer can outweigh the cost of your canning equipment. In addition, you may find yourself paying more in electricity per month. For those storing less than 1 year, you will have to decide if saving $50 to $100 is worth the risk of losing it all during a blackout, or a freezer burn, or worth the hassle of thawing. So, is canning worth it? I'll leave you to decide. What do you think? If you like this kind of stuff, be sure to give a thumbs up and subscribe. The end.